Now, one of the major features of the enforced pause in the live sports events world has, of course, been the rise in prominence of virtual sports and esports. Certainly has the feel of a big moment for the emergence of esports, but let's get the views of a couple of experts in the field in a moment. We've seen the virtual Grand Prix in Formula One, for example. We've also seen a virtual Grand National take place. There are plenty of great examples of virtual sports and esports in action. And I think we are just about ready to hear from our experts now who are going to take up the conversation. And in fact, they're right behind me now. And so first of all, we can go to Berlin and say a very good afternoon to Chris Hana. Chris from our sister publication, the Esports Observer. Chris, how are you?
I'm really good. How are you?
Very good, very good. I like your setup there. We're judging everybody's backdrops, and yours is certainly in the top half.
Thank you very much.
Very good.
That's where I spent all my days today.
Excellent. Chris is going to be in conversation over the next few minutes with our guest. Delighted to have him with us. Very recently into his new post as head of Gaming and Esports at Infront. It's André Fläckel. André, very warm welcome to you.
Thanks for having me.
Superb. Chris has plenty of questions for you. We'd encourage all of you watching us as well to fire in some questions. Chris, for the moment, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the nice introduction. You already introduced André as well. So my name is Chris Hana. I'm the CEO and founder of the Esports Observer. And today I'm joined by André Fläckel, who I've known for years by now, who recently jumped into a new role as head of Gaming and Esports at Infront, the company. So André, thanks for joining me, first of all.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for taking the time.
And as I've said, we've known each other for years now, and you've worked in sports. The recent years you spent working in esports. If I would have to describe the work you did, I'd say you're a bridge builder. You build bridges between esports and sports. You build bridges between esports and advertising. And just recently you joined Infront, as mentioned. What will you do there?
Bridge building is, I think, a very good description. So it's at the end of the day, you have a lot of young people growing up in an environment where video gaming, playing video games and watching people playing video games is normal. And they grew up in an environment where also a lot of older people are living that might not see the value or the reason behind that. And to combine those two worlds is a little bit the big picture, so to say. At Infront, we have quite some experience in traditional sports over 35 years. I believe with a lot of good clients in the sports and advertising world. In terms of esports and gaming, my job is to further develop the business and also help our clients. So basically, we help brands, sports rights holders, esports organizations, but also TV networks and broadcasters in terms of their esports engagements. It starts with consulting, goes into production, project management, sponsorship sales. So it's comparable to what we do in traditional sports, but it is at the end of the day different because we're talking about a different target group, a different kind of sports, and it's basically a transformation we're having, and I'm trying to shape this transformation.
So you've worked in both worlds, sports and esports, and I'm going to ask you the tough question right at the beginning. With the conversation that's ongoing right now, do you see esports as an opportunity or as a threat to traditional sports?
Threat is a big word, I would say. Opportunity is of course the one I would go for. I mean, a lot of people talk about esports, about the next big thing, or if it's not the big thing already. I think we need to step back a little bit and also see a little bit of context. So the esports industry globally is between the gaming industry globally is between 100 billion and 140 billion US dollars per year, depending on which source you're referring to. The esports industry is a small part of that. That's about 1 billion in revenues per year. If you compare this to the music business and the movie business, which is between 40 and 60 billion per year, then gaming itself is quite big. But if you compare it to the global sports business, which I think is around 500 billion, then there is still a gap, and I don't think we will pass that. But we see an increase of viewership and revenues. So the increase is going on for a couple of years now, and it's between 10 and 20%. The development is going on, and it's a very healthy development, and it's growing. And at the moment, we don't see a sign of slowing it down. And maybe to also name another number, I think YouTube recently published how many gaming hours, how many hours of gaming content were consumed on YouTube in 2019, and that was 50 billion hours of content. When you compare this to the numbers Netflix announced, they said Netflix content consumed in total was 60 billion. So there's not the gap is not so big. And the question is, you now look at this development of video gaming, of sports going on, esports, and then it's a question, what do you do about it? It also depends on what interest you have, and you can ignore it, you can react on it, or you can actively shape it.
What's your take on all the entertainment things that you've recently seen? So if you look at, I don't know, games like Fortnite becoming these kind of, place where people live, and you mentioned that, younger demographics, you basically touched on that. Like, what's your take on the generational shift that we're seeing, that will follow with new people coming to Earth?
Yeah. I mean, it's somehow normal to grow up with video gaming, and it was kind of already when we were young. It's quite some years ago. We're a little bit the silver surfer in the esports industry, I would say, and it was normal to grow up with a Game Boy or Super Nintendo, and it emerged to something bigger. And maybe generations before us, it was the TV, and maybe the generation before that was newspaper, and these kind of mediums are growing, and it's natural that people grow up with it and somehow attached to it. And if you look like an average gamer or average esports fan today, then these are normal people. So there are a lot of cliches already in people's minds, but this is definitely not the case for 100% of the target group. And you do have young kids who are going to football training, basketball training, soccer training in the afternoon, and in the evening they play video games or they watch other people play video games. So that's the new normal, if you want to say like that.
I was being judged for being a gamer back in the days. That's how old I am. But luckily we're overcoming this.
It was not cool back in school, actually. Yes, you're right. I agree. And you were cool when you're doing sports or maybe music. And nowadays, if you go to the schools, you are uncool if you don't do gaming. You can check that with your kids.
Yeah. So let's get really practical. Actually, let's get a bit hands-on then. So okay. if I'm a brand in today's world, I probably heard esports, I heard gaming. You threw around some of the big numbers. So now I'm interested. I'm trying to read up, and there's so much information that it's really hard for me to understand where I need to start. So what would your advice be to me as a brand on how I can engage with the esports industry?
Some practical generic advice would be that, first of all, you need to find an expert that helps you to understand the market. That's a crucial thing. And then internally also, you need to make sure that you give the right resources to the right people. So in my experience, it's always helpful if you have a senior management or marketing director who sees the opportunity and makes the decision. We want to have an opinion on that, or we want to evaluate if it's for us or not. It's still okay if you say it's not for us, but you need to have an opinion on that. So together with a with a youngster in your company, maybe a younger employee who you definitely have people in your company who love video gaming. So they might be very happy to deep dive into that topic. So together with the expert, you sit together, and then you first of all need to figure out, like in any marketing plan, what's your strategy and what's your business purpose? Is it that you want to attract the younger target group by branding or engagement? It's very close, I would say. But is there maybe also an opportunity to use esports to recruit new IT employees or programmers? So that would be an HR-driven campaign. What are your key markets? And what's your value add? So based on that, you can go to the different esports stakeholders out there. These are leagues, gaming publishers, teams, players, influencers. And based on your picture in mind, you go to them and then you compare what's the best platform for you. Does it make sense to be in an event to have a live audience? Or does it make sense to partner with a team because you want to have direct access to the players and their social media content? So then you pick one or two assets, you do a sponsorship deal with them. Usually those deals are between 1 and 3 years, I would say, in average. I wouldn't go much less. Like a 1 month campaign is a nice start, but won't give you the big impact. But it's also, on the other hand, it's not usual to do a 10-year contract, for instance, as long as your name is not Intel, for instance, who's partner of esports for 20 years. And then you make your story come to life. You create your story, you produce content, and you integrate it in your existing marketing plan. It's not like you need to shape everything new. It's more like how you integrate this as an additional marketing channel in your marketing plan. And while you're doing it, you start looking at the KPIs and you set up KPIs, also like in all marketing plans, because at the end of the day, you might need to go back to your board or CEO and explain them in 20 minutes what you have done in esports, what did it cost, and why you might want to extend or prolong this. And at the moment, I think it's key to make those esports engagements accessible for people and also transform it into a language that people understand who have not spent 10 years in esports. So that's how you grow.
Can you give me a concrete example on what sports right holders can do based on your experience?
There are also different opportunities. So the first thing that comes to people's minds is, if I do a sports game like basketball, I should do a sports simulation game in basketball, so NBA 2K, for instance. The same goes with football, soccer. There are a lot of sports simulation platforms out there, and that is a good first step to tip your toe into the water and make your first experience. But then, after maybe you're a team owner and you have your own football players, e-gamer football players, if you want to call it like that, then it's the question: what's the next step? How do you become a meaningful part of an ecosystem that's already developing? A lot of things are not developed yet. A lot of league structures are not developed yet. Can you participate in that? Can you maybe own a share in a league that is just getting developed and be ready for future generations that will play that and already playing it? So that's one strategy, and it's really about identifying the white spots. And I think an expert will help you there. But what if you do when with maybe no sports simulation game out there? So for instance, if you look at handball or winter sports, I think that maybe there's a couple of games, but not big ones existing. So then it's a question like, does it make sense to create an own game? Is that easy? It's not easy. Can we build an esports ecosystem around that? Can we build it on our own? How you finance it, how we refinance it? And maybe can you go to a couple of these gaming publishers and talk to them and say like, hey, is there a middle way here? Can you help us produce a game? And maybe they're open to it. If you are a local federation from one country, and let's say handball, then it might be not big enough. But if you have combined efforts on a global level, then it might make sense. And it's also the question if you want that. So the handball audience, for instance, is comparable old, and maybe this is a a good tool to make it a little bit younger. And if you then, if you then look a little bit beyond the plate, at the moment, video games are being played on PC, smartphone, console. Depending on where you are in the world, the one or the other is more being played. There are new technologies coming, and mixed reality, augmented reality, virtual reality are in super early stage. But building new esports games on new technology is just a logic step. And I think in the next 10, 15 years, we will have esports competitions that have actual movement included.
So let's go back to today and let's also look at existing technology. So specifically in today's situation, there's a massive increase of esports programming on linear television. Do you believe that this is a sustainable approach? And what can broadcast companies, for example, do to authentically engage with the space?
I think COVID-19 helped in that matter to push esports more into TV. But we have to be honest here, it was also because a lack of other content, because all the other sports were on hold. So I think it gave a push. And you see ESPN, Fox, a lot of different networks and broadcaster tried out things or have already done it. And now is the question, what will happen after the COVID-19 time? So maybe are these numbers and maybe this experience good enough to further think about this? And if you ask people in esports, then a lot of the time they tell you that esports is not made for TV and people consume only on streaming platforms. Yes, at the moment, yeah. But I think there are also a lot of nice crossovers and approaches that are multi-beneficial for all the parties. I mean, you can't trump your experience in this last 30 years in TV production and format creation. And esports is still very young, and there's definitely some knowledge that can be used here. And if you maybe combine those two worlds, again, bridge builder, between esports know-how and also extensive production TV know-how, then I think there are a lot of interesting white spots. And also broadcasters are in a perfect position to build that bridge also towards parents. Yeah? So there's, if you look at a normal dinner table, for instance, then there's still a little bit of misunderstanding between parents and kids in terms of their hobbies when it's related to gaming. And maybe you can play a crucial part in that conversation, and try to combine those two worlds. And I think there are different formats that definitely make sense.
So let's look at bridges. What's next for you and Infront in esports? What bridges are you going to build?
Our ambitions are quite big, to be honest. So we look at in different things, but I don't need to be too creative to look ahead and say like we create the next big thing. It's very unlikely you can plan this. It's more about looking at what is the status quo, and when you look at all different sports organizations, at brands, at broadcasters, where we have working relationship with or not, and what they do, then there are comparable, easy to find white spots to develop this. And it depends a little bit on your commitment and on your interest, but having this conversation and make yourself an opinion about what do we want to do or what we don't want to do just makes sense, especially because the increase of game fans of esports and gamers, it will increase rather than decrease. So you should have an opinion on that.
So where can I learn more about what you will do and where can I follow your work?
you can contact me via LinkedIn or Twitter, of course. But we also created a little esports white paper. It's 2 pages. You can download it on the Leaders website, I think. And if you're interested in the topic, we offer a couple of free 90-minute esports expert workshops where we give like a basic education piece and talk about your potential needs and strategies in esports. That is for free. I think 10. I don't know how many. And then we can have a follow up if you're interested and see if it makes sense to start that journey. Yeah.
That, ladies and gentlemen, was 2 Germans speaking about esports in English. And I want to throw it back to the studio to see if there's any questions for André. And well, thank you for taking time and have this discussion, André.
Fantastic.
Thanks for having me.
Fantastic discussion as well, gentlemen. Great to have you with us. We do have a couple of questions, actually, that we'd love to throw at you. We might have to go to you. Oh, no, André, you're back with us. Great. First one, there's a lot of, I think, confusion still amongst people in traditional sports about the difference and the definitions between esports and gaming. I wonder if, André, you have a perspective on that. How do you define both of those?
In a very, very simple way, gaming is amateurs playing video games like me taking a run around the lake. I'm also not a professional. So there are 2.4 billion people on Earth who play video games. That's quite a lot and quite a diverse target group. So that's a hardcore gamer who buys a game each month and plays it. But it's also my 7-year-old cousin who might play a game for 10 minutes. And he's potentially also a gamer. On the other hand, you have the esports industry and the esports fans. So this is the professional video gaming industry. And that means an esports player is by definition a professional video gamer. That means he does nothing than playing video games. And an esports fan is someone who likes to watch other people, especially professionals, playing video games. So that's a little bit the definition between, let's say, professional and amateur, like in sports.
Another question for our 2 Germans on the wall talking esports in English, and it's Dankeschön from me to both of you for that. This one is from Simon Parry from Southampton Football Club. Beyond football, tennis and motor racing, he writes, which sports do you think would be the most entertaining as virtual sports and also have the most commercial potential?
So we have to see it a little bit in context. So the most successful games out there, and this is probably no surprise for a lot of listeners, are not the sports simulation games. So the most successful ones are fantasy games, shooter games like Counter-Strike, League of Legends, Fortnite. Sports simulations have one problem, and the problem is that they're the actual simulation. So that means, I give you an example. If I like to watch something, then I'd rather watch the real life game than the simulation. So a sports simulation game, by definition, needs to be a little bit more creative in terms to get bigger viewership numbers. So it very much depends on the strategy of the publisher. So EA Games, for instance, I think they talk in a couple of minutes. They do a lot to create meaningful events, to create meaningful content, and to create a game that people like to play. If you look at sports simulation games at the moment, then the top ones are definitely FIFA and Madden. And then it comes basketball at some point, and then comes ice hockey. And the question is the future development the actual sports simulation only, or do you maybe flip it a little bit into something that cannot be done in real life? So maybe there's a game, as an example, it's called Rocket League. And Rocket League is you play a car and your job is to push this huge football into a goal. So it's basically cars and soccer combined, which is a very smart approach because a lot of people feel attached to it. And I see a lot of growth potential in that direction, actually, rather than only the simulation.
Final word from you, Chris. Anything to add to that?
No, I think that really hits the nail. The only other angle I probably can give is that the way I look at esports, it's more entertainment than it's about the actual sports. So that goes also to the fantasy portion. It's something you probably can't do in real life because the cars also can fly, for a short period of time. So that makes it more complicated with Rocket League. But if you look at Fortnite, where you have these concerts and 20+ million people watching a virtual concert of an actual musician in a video game, that is pure entertainment. And I feel that what you also see with today's sports, and I hope, nobody's going to kill me for this, but you see that people are probably not interested in watching the full game anymore as much as they were before. But, they want to know what the players are doing, what they had for breakfast, who they're married to, how they train. Like, it's all about these bite-sized and entertainment format-ish kind of clips and things. And I think that's very close to esports. So I think one of the sports that's really close to esports is actually WWE with a format, because that combines, the elements that I feel, are critical to the esports industry.
Always great to have a couple of esports experts with us. André Fläckel, thank you very much for joining us. You mentioned your new white paper from Infront. It is available to download, as you said, by clicking the Partners tab on the LeadersWeek.direct platform. So I encourage everybody to do that. And Chris Hana, thank you ever so much for joining us and steering us through that conversation. And remember, all things esports at esportsobserver.com. Thank you both.